What's up, fam? It's me, and I'm back. And I debated on doing this video. Uh, I did one pertaining to some of this a while back, but I never uploaded it because so many people had an opinion, and it was so much going on. And I just wanted to sit it out and wait and see what was gonna happen. But now I see that it's necessary for me to speak on this. I need to speak on it if even if nobody listens, even if nobody views this video or whatever, for my own personal reasons, I need to speak on this because some things have gotten out of hand. Some things have gone way, 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 you know, out of left field or whatever you want to call it, and everything needs to be brought back into perspective, and we need to get back on track. Everybody needs to get back on code, and we need to understand what's going on. We need to understand why certain things are happening, and we just need to be real about some stuff. Point blank, we just need to be real about some stuff. So that's the reason why I decided that I needed to go ahead and I needed to speak on some of this stuff. Um, But first, before I do that, I want to thank everybody that has subscribed. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. You will never know how much it means to me that you subscribe to this channel, that you support this channel, that you view my videos, that you like my videos, that that you like my commentary, even if you don't like it, that you still comment and you still view, because we all have different opinions. We just have to learn how to be respectful towards each other as far as opinions are concerned. But there comes a time when we have to just look at the truth and accept the truth for what it is. And we just have to see things for what they really are. And we have to stop with the foolishness. We have to stop with the foolishness. We have to stop with the buffoonery, and we have to get down to business. And we just, we have to speak truth to power, and we have to accept truth when we see it, when we hear it. And that's basically what this video is going to be about. It's going to be about some truths that we're just going to have to accept. As foundational Black Americans, there are some truths that we just have to accept about ourselves, about our community. There's just some truths that we're just going to have to accept. And until we accept those truths about ourselves, about our community, we're not going to be able to overcome the issues that we have. And until we can overcome, I've said this before in other videos, until we can overcome the issues that we have in our own community and the issues that we have as foundational Black Americans, we're definitely not going to be able to do anything about white supremacy. We're not going to be able to defeat white supremacy as long as we can't defeat the issues that we have in our own community. So we have definitely got to get to that place where we just acknowledge some truths, some just flat out point blank truths. We just acknowledge them. We just accept them. You understand what I'm saying? And we just keep it moving. Because until we can do that, and until we can combat the major issues that we have among ourselves, we can't combat, any enemy that's attacking us from the outside, as long as we have all these internal issues. So that's mainly what this video is going to be about. It's yes, certain people will be named in this video. Yes, certain things will be brought out in this video, whatever the case may be. But the issues will be the main focus of this video. The issues that we have to attack and the issues that we have to take care of, the issues that we have to acknowledge in our community before we can do anything else, before we can move forward. Okay, so now let's get started. And I thought about how I was going to do this, and now that I'm actually doing it in my mind, I'm reconstructing how I'm going to do this. But y'all just bear with me, because I do things my own way. I don't do things like everybody else. I'm not here to copy anybody else. I'm not here, to try to be a duplicate or a replica of somebody else. I do things my way. I talk my way. I present information my way. I present the facts my way. This is just my way of doing it. And I'm not trying to be like anybody else. That's what's so beautiful about us, is that we are unique. As Dr. Claud Anderson has called us over and over and over again, we are an exceptional people. And it's because of our uniqueness, and because of our unique experience in America, that we are exceptional. And that's the first thing that we've got to understand about ourselves. And that's the first thing that we've got to take in and internalize individually, as individuals, as well as a whole, as a group. We've got to acknowledge, and we've got to accept, and we've got to embrace the fact that because of our experience in the United States, in America, we are unique people. We are exceptional people. That's the reason why we have our own designation. It's about time we got our own designation. Now, whatever you choose to call yourself, whether you choose to call yourself an American descendant of slavery, whether you choose to call yourself a descendant of American slavery, whether you choose to call yourself a foundational Black American, whether you choose to call yourself what Dr. Claud Anderson calls us, Native Black Americans, whatever you choose to call yourself, understand that we are distinct. We have our own designation, and we are unique because of our experience here. Nobody else has experienced what we have experienced here in America. And because of what we experienced, because of the brutality of it, because of the barbarism of it, because it was meant to wipe us out as a group. It wasn't meant to wipe us out individually. It was meant to wipe us out as a group. In the clip that I will play for you a little later on, Dr. Claud Anderson makes it clear. We entered into slavery and became an enslaved people as a group. We went through slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, black codes, redlining, all that we have gone through as a group. And the only way we're going to come out is we have to come out as a group. So this is not about one or two people. This is not about 4 or 5 people. This is not about 10 or 12 people. This is not about 100 or 200 people. This is about us as a collective, as a whole, as a group. Because even though some foundational Black Americans don't want to accept this, don't want to admit this, don't want to acknowledge this, they think that white supremacy will accept them as individuals. No. As long as you're a foundational Black American, as long as you're Black in America, you're still a part of the group. And as long as white supremacy and the dominant society can use you against the group, they may uplift you, they may prop you up, they may try to make you feel like you're special, they may give you special crumbs off master's table, or whatever the case may be. But as soon as you are of no use to them, as soon as your usefulness to them has worn out, then you once again become a part of the group. And you have to deal with the same discrimination, the same racism, the same tyranny that the group has to deal with. And that is the problem. That has always been the problem, and that continues to be the problem. We have individual black folk, individual foundational black Americans. We have individual black immigrants who come in and they think that because they're singled out for whatever reason by the dominant society, that that makes them better than the rest of the group. That separates them from the group. It makes them think that because they are willing to do things that maybe other members of the group are not willing to do, and they're willing to maybe sell out or whatever, or they're willing to go along with the ideologies and the agendas that are being pushed by white supremacy. They think because of that, it separates them from the group. And because they are given, individual little props and awards and rewards and all of that, that they have somehow become a part of the other group, the group which is the dominant society. But understand, you're black, and you're going to always be black. You might not think you're black first, but the dominant society always sees you as black first. And the only reason why they prop you up, the only reason why they give you these little special awards and these little special rewards, and they make you feel special, and they give you all this attention, and they make sure you get all of this attention, is because you are willing to promote their stereotypes of black people. You're willing to promote their agendas against black people. You're willing to sell out black people. You're willing to come out publicly and say things and do things that undermine your group. But as soon as they can no longer use you, as soon as they can no longer use you to promote their agendas, as soon as they can no longer use you to undermine the rest of the black group, as soon as you're no longer useful anymore, then they butt you right back in with the rest of the group. And you have to deal with what the rest of the group has to deal with. The same racism, the same discrimination, the same white supremacy, the same issues that we have, then all of a sudden you have them. But this is not about individuals. This is about us as a group, as a collective. We got into this situation as a group. We can only come out of this situation as a group. That should be obvious at this point. There are individual black people that you would look at them and you would think that they got out. You would look at them and you would think that somehow or another they beat the system. Because of the money that they may have, or because of the material possessions they may have, or because of the positions that you may think they have, or because of the power that you may think they have. Let's just go down the list. Let's look at Oprah. Let's look at Michael Jackson. Let's look at some of the superstar ball players and football players and basketball players like Michael Jordan and some of the others. Jay-Z's and all of that. You may think that these individuals, these black individuals, whether they be foundational black Americans or whether they be black immigrants, you may think that they have beat the system. You may think that somehow or another they have arrived, or somehow or another they did it. Somehow or another they accomplished something. No, they didn't accomplish anything. They got their wealth, they got their position. Some of these black politicians, that congressional black caucus, and some of the members of that caucus and all of that. You may think, okay, well, they rose above. No, they didn't rise above anything. Because they were willing to go along with status quo. Because they were willing to go along with business as usual. Because they were willing to sell out. Because they have been willing to push the white supremacy agendas. Because they have been willing to be the black faces of white supremacy. Because they have been willing to be those who come out and look like us and do everything that they can to convince us that we have to stay in line and we have to keep things going the way they've been going for 400 plus years. Because of that, they have received certain awards. They have received certain rewards. But what you have to understand is, as soon as they are no longer useful, as soon as they are no longer useful in keeping black folk in line and keeping us going along with the status quo, as soon as we're no longer listening to them and they use their usefulness, then they are broken. They are broken and they are sent right back to deal with what the rest of the group has to deal with. So we've got to understand that it's not about individuals. If that was the case, if it was about individuals, then individually we could all sell out and we could all, decide that, we're going to just go along with the program and we're just going to promote white supremacy and we're just going to promote white supremacy policies and laws and we could all, get a little butter biscuit and get a little crumb from master's table or whatever. But that's not what it's about. It's about the group. And how has the so-called success of these individuals, the Oprahs, the Michael Jacksons, the Bill Cosbys, the Charles Barkleys, the Stephen A. Smiths, how has their so-called success helped foundational black Americans as a whole? How has it helped the group, the Tyler Perrys, these folks that are multimillionaires? Oprah is listed as a billionaire. The Byron Allens. How has their so-called success uplifted and helped the black community? It hasn't. It hasn't at all. It hasn't helped us economically. It hasn't helped us politically. We've got all of these black politicians, the whole congressional black caucus, and many of them are millionaires. How has that helped the black community as a whole? In all of these states, in all of these cities, how has their so-called success, these individuals, how has their so-called individual success helped us? It hasn't. Economically, we're at death's door. Politically, we have no power. We have no clout. Socially, we're at the bottom. We are the underclass, and we will soon be the permanent underclass if we don't get it together. So how has their individual successes helped the foundational black American community as a whole in America? It hasn't. Are they taking their collective wealth, these individual people, are they taking their collective wealth and bringing it back to the black community to build and uplift the black community? So let me get into this video. Let me get deep into this video. Recently, as many of you know, some of you may not, but most of you do. Dr. Claud Anderson was on the Breakfast Club. And on the Breakfast Club, he just laid it out. He laid it out. And I listened to his interview on the Breakfast Club. And then, just to be sure for myself, I said, okay, I want to see for myself if this icon, this living legend in black empowerment has been consistent down through the decades. So I started doing my research. I started listening to speeches that he has given and interviews that he has given and all of that. And I went back as far as 1995, which was 24 years ago. And I pulled up an interview that he did with the Detroit Black Journal, Darrell Wood, back in 1995. And I listened to that 1995 interview, and I compared it with his 2019 interview that he just did on the Breakfast Club. Consistency. Consistent. He has had the same argument. He has had the same ideology. He has put forth the same talking points consistently down through the decades. Nothing has changed. He's saying the exact same thing in 2019 that he was saying in 1995, that he was saying before 1995 when he wrote the first book. I think the first book was Black Labor, White Wealth. Consistency. He has been ignored, and maybe not so much ignored as much as all of these other voices that were pushing for integration. Let's integrate. Let's become a part of the dominant society. Let's integrate. Let's set aside what we got going on, and let's set aside what we have accomplished and what we have achieved in our own communities. Let's set that aside so that we can integrate and become a part of the dominant society. And I think all of those voices just drowned out his voice and other voices like him, at least for the masses. Now, there have always been people that have continued to follow what Dr. Claud Anderson was saying, what Dr. John Henry Clark was saying, what Dr. Lily Fuller was saying, and what so many other people were saying. There have always been those who would continue to follow them and not join in with the crowd. But I think those voices got drowned out because the louder voices, the voices that were being pushed by the white mainstream media, the voices that were being pushed by these black puppets that are sent out to push that propaganda and that rhetoric on the black community, those voices were louder. And because those voices were louder, some of these other voices got drowned out. And I think Dr. Claud Anderson's voice is one of those voices that got drowned out. But the thing is, even though his voice got drowned out and nobody was paying attention, nobody was at least we as a whole weren't practicing his strategies, weren't following his programs, weren't following his plan. The amazing thing about this man is he never stopped saying it. There are a lot of people whose voices have been drowned out, and because they realized that their voices were being drowned out, and because they realized that they weren't being paid attention to and they weren't being taken heed to or whatever, they stopped. They just stopped talking. But after all these decades, he hasn't stopped talking. He hasn't stopped saying what he was put out there to say. He hasn't stopped his message, and his message has not changed in over 3 decades. It's the same message. If you listen to him now and listen to him back in 1995, he's saying the exact same thing. His message has not changed. His message to black people, his message for economic growth, his message for economic empowerment, his message for black empowerment, his message for us to be competitive and for us to survive in the United States of America has not changed in all these decades. even though he knew he wasn't being heard, even though he knew he wasn't being paid attention to, even though he knew nobody was taking heed to what he was saying. He continued to preach the same message. And in 2019, at the age of 85 years old, he goes on the Breakfast Club and is still preaching the exact same thing he was preaching in 1995. Consistency, people. That's what this is all about. This is all about consistency. This isn't about people that, 1 year they have one ideology, and then as the tide shifts, or as the tide changes, or if they realize that their voice isn't being heard, or if they realize that people aren't paying attention to them, or they're not getting enough views, or they're not getting enough likes on social media or on videos or YouTube or whatever, then a year later, they change up their message. They change up their ideology. They change the message and change the ideology according to the way the wind is blowing. This man has remained consistent for all these decades. So now he's under attack. And we all know who he's under attack about. He's under attack by Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell, these so-called leaders of the ADOS political organization. The same people who, for over a year, told us that ADOS was just a lineage. It was not an organization. It was just a lineage. So anytime anybody outside of the Black empowerment space tried to call it an organization, those of us who are part of the Black empowerment space would rise up, and we would be adamant in no. It's a lineage. It's not a political organization. It's not an organization of any kind. It's a lineage, and it does not have any founders. It does not have any leaders. Okay, that's the first place where they switched up on us. Because after over a year of telling us that and having us defend it as that, just a lineage, once the New York Times article came out, they finally went ahead and admitted that yes, ADOS on this side is a lineage, but over here on this side is actually a political organization, with Tone and Yvette as founders and leaders. So that's the first place where they lose on consistency. But they have attacked Dr. Claud Anderson because of some bad business dealings, or maybe a business deal that went bad, or whatever, or because he doesn't have a PhD or a degree in economics. They have attacked him. And this is not the first attack on him. Yvette has attacked him before. But neither one of them have a degrees in economics. Byron Allen, who they champion and who they wanted everybody to drop everything for to go support in his Comcast, in his case against Comcast, and remember now the 1866 Civil Rights Act that they wanted us to drop everything for and go and support Byron Allen. It's about Black folk being able to contract and do business. Now remember that. It's about Black folk being able to be a part of business contracts and do business. Just like the white folks, the dominant society at that time in 1866 when this civil rights bill was enacted. It was all about business. But Byron Allen doesn't have a PhD or any other kind of degree in economics. If we go and look back at Steve Jobs and some of these other folks who are billionaires and have big corporations, we will see when they first started out, many of them filed bankruptcy. Donald Trump, who is heralded as a great American businessman, has filed bankruptcy. If I'm not mistaken, not too long ago, he was in bankruptcy court. He may still be in there now. So the filing of a bankruptcy does not determine whether or not you are a good or a bad business person. It does not determine whether or not you know your stuff as far as economics is concerned. Bankruptcy is just a part of business. But Dr. Claud Anderson is being attacked on all of this. And I understand that it's a black bank. Okay, but what does that have to do with business? Black banks understand that they have to operate and they have to function in this economy that's pretty much the same way that white banks do. It's about business. And folks need to understand what bankruptcy really entails. Bankruptcy is just the way that you protect certain assets. Bankruptcy doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to pay back a debt. You may still have to pay back that debt, but in bankruptcy, a lot of times your debts are consolidated. And you pay a certain amount monthly until you pay back certain debts. And because they are consolidated, your debtors are willing to take a little bit less than what they would have originally gotten. But bankruptcy doesn't necessarily mean that you just get out of the debt, that you just never have to pay the debt. You still may have to pay that debt, but you just have to pay it probably. What's the best way to put this? You pay less money. Let's put it that way. You don't pay the whole entire debt, the whole entire amount that's owed. That's part of bankruptcy. But because people don't understand bankruptcy, don't understand what the bankruptcy codes are there for, don't understand what it means for somebody to file bankruptcy, don't understand that bankruptcy is just a way for you to protect certain assets that you have or whatever the case, then people automatically assume that he's trying to defraud this bank. No. The bank may still end up being paid back. They may end up being paid back less than what's owed to them, but they still may end up getting paid back. So they may not lose out 100%. And plus, banks have insurance. They have all kinds of other protections built into these contracts and these loans to cover them and protect them in the instance that the business doesn't turn out like it's supposed to, or that the business fails, or that the dettee falls into hard times or can't pay, or actually files bankruptcy. They have all kinds of protections and provisions already in the contract to cover and protect them, the bank. But just because a business files bankruptcy doesn't necessarily mean that these people didn't know how to do business. Markets change. Supply and demand changes. The financial climate changes. There are all kinds of changes that can occur that make what looked like a good business decision turn out to be a not so good business decision. And all of those things have to be taken into account. But to attack somebody and to come out and try to discredit somebody and be that disrespectful based on business dealings, based on a black man doing business just like white folks do business. Come on now. But anyway, he's under attack. And he's under attack by two people that have only been in the game for what? A year? Year and a half? 2 years? They've only been on the scene. This is a man who has been working tirelessly for decades. Even when he realized that his voice was being drowned out. Even when he realized that his message was not being listened to and was not being taken heed to, he didn't stop. And now all these years later, he's still preaching the same thing. Nothing in his message has changed. Okay, let's get back to consistency. Since Yvette and Tone want to attack Dr. Claud Anderson, let's get back into consistency as far as their record is concerned versus his record. Okay? Consistency. And I'm going to play you the clip and let you hear some of this interview that he did with Detroit Black Journal back in 1995 so that you can hear for yourself. And it will also be linked in the description box. And it's also a video that's up on the channel. And you can hear how his ideology, his talking points, his message has not changed in over 24 years. Right? Okay, so let's get back to consistency. Yvette and Tone came on the scene all about reparations for foundational Black Americans, or what they called them, American descendants of slaves. That's what they came on the scene about. It's all about being Black. If you're not mentioning being Black, if you're not talking about being Black, if you're not bringing a Black agenda, if you're not talking about reparations for ADOS, American descendants of slaves or whatever, we don't have anything to say. We don't need to talk to you. We don't need to hear from you, or whatever the case may be. Now, that's what they came on the scene preaching. They came on the scene preaching that it was all about reparations. And I'll link this as well if it's still there to be linked, where Tone did a video that was coming from the I think it was a WD somebody's I think it was the Samuel Du Bois social something or whatever. He did, and I'll, like I said, I'm gonna link it so that you can go see it for yourself. But he posted this video on Twitter. And this video was like an advertisement for a report that Tone and several other people had put together. And in this video, he talks about reparations. He talks about the solution. He goes through all these 10 myths that Black folks believe will bridge the wealth gap between white America and Black America. But he calls it a racial wealth gap, right? All of a sudden, it's a racial wealth gap. And in this video, he talks about all these myths. He talks about how Black folks believe that entrepreneurship and owning your own business and all of this kind of stuff and keeping the Black dollar in the Black community as long as you possibly can, and how we believe that will help, get rid of this wealth gap between Black Americans and white Americans, and how that's a myth. And he talks about what their solutions are. And their solutions are reparations, or baby bonds, or federal jobs guarantees. And in this report, they several times they talk about people of color. Several times they talk about Latino and Black. Several times they talk about white and Black. Several times they talk about marginalized groups. Several times they talk about all Americans and what needs to be done for all Americans. See, that's inconsistency. When you start out talking about this is supposed to be just for black folk, this is something that we need specifically for American descendants of slaves. If you're not coming with a strictly black agenda, we don't want to talk to you. And then you read the report and you find out that they want to include all Americans. They're talking about minorities. They're talking about people of color. They're talking about marginalized communities. They're not talking about just black. They're not talking about promoting just a black agenda. That's inconsistency. But again, Dr. Claud Anderson has been saying the same thing, that he's not talking about minorities. He's not talking about white folks. He's not talking about LGBT. He's not talking about immigrants. He's not talking about midgets. He's not talking about humpbacks. He's not talking about this. He's talking about black folks. Native black Americans. He's been saying the exact same thing for decades. Consistency, people. Consistency. All right. Another area of consistency where Tone and Yvette fall short. And Dr. Claud Anderson stands strong. Tone and Yvette will bounce back and forth between, it's politics and economics ain't going to do it. And then they'll go back and they'll say, well, it's economics. And then they'll jump back over here. Well, it's politics and economics is not going to do it. Okay, I actually heard, I actually listened when I was still following them and listening to them. I actually heard a live where Yvette said just having a job doesn't do it anymore. Working and just having a job is not going to get it anymore. Working and just because working now does not produce wealth. Now, that's what she said. That working doesn't produce wealth. So if working doesn't produce wealth and it's just having a job, no matter how good paying a job you may have, if that's not going to produce wealth, and if that's not going to produce the kind of wealth that you can pass down from generation to generation, then explain to me how having a government job guarantee is going to produce wealth. When she said on that live that working is not going to produce wealth. Because on that live, she talked about how years and years and decades ago, how your parents could work and your parents could buy a home and all of that. How now we can't even work to afford to buy a home. How most of us now, if we own a home, 9 times out of 10, it's something that we got from our parents. So she made it clear that just working, having a good paying job or whatever is not going to help you accumulate wealth. Something that you can pass down to the next generation. So it's not going to help bridge that gap, that wealth gap between white America and black America. But now on this video, they're telling you to depend on government jobs guarantees. When she just said that a job is not going to produce any wealth. A job is not going to help bridge that gap. Okay, well then why are you promoting that we sit and we wait for the government to pass out jobs? Jobs that you just said yourself are not going to produce any wealth. Jobs that are not going to help bridge that wealth gap. Jobs that are not going to produce the kind of wealth that we need to pass down from generation to generation, because you can't pass a job down. You can pass a business down that you own to the next generation. You can pass a corporation that you formed down to the next generation. But you can't pass a government job down to the next generation. That's another level of inconsistency. Whereas Dr. Claud Anderson has been talking about we need our own jobs, we need our own industry, we need our own economy for decades and hasn't stopped. In the interview with the Breakfast Club, he talks about how black folks are not producing anything but sweat. We're sweating on these basketball courts. We're sweating in these on these football fields. You know, we're sweating in these music videos. We're sweating in these movies. We're producing sweat, but nobody's buying sweat. So we're all a bunch of those particular people are a bunch of high-paid employees, but they still don't really own anything. Another place where Tone and Yvette have been a little inconsistent. If I'm not mistaken, when they first started this, they first started saying that we shouldn't vote at all. That we shouldn't vote unless somebody has something to offer. That unless somebody, that unless some candidate is talking about reparations and talking about having something to offer us, we shouldn't vote at all. Then they switched it up, and the next thing I know, they were talking about voting this down ballot stuff. And I did a video, giving the definition of what it means to vote down ballot, which simply means you just go down the ballot until you get to the lesser races, the state and local races, and you still vote Democrat. So what's it going to be, Yvette and Tone? Are we going to vote for people who have something to offer us, or are we going to vote down ballot? Because I don't think we can do both. Because what we're demanding and what we are owed and what we need to make the playing field level for us, we can't get it on a state and local, in a state and local arena. But Dr. Claud Anderson, on the other hand, has been consistent down through the years that we don't need to vote at all. We don't need to vote at all unless somebody is offering us something. That we need to get out of this partisanship, belonging to this party or belonging to that party or whatever. We just need to stop having anything to do with that partisanship process. And, if anything, we need to start our own independent party and present our own candidate, even if that candidate doesn't win. But it does absolutely nothing for us to vote. Unless we're voting as a block. Unless we're voting as a group for somebody who has not only promised us certain things, but has actually put some of those promises into action. Consistency, people. It's all about folk being consistent. Now, again, they've only been on the scene for what, a year and a half, 2 years, whatever. They've only been on the real scene as far as this whole reparations thing is concerned, black empowerment, and all of that. And already they've switched up, I don't know how many times. Dr. Claud Anderson, on the other hand, has been in this for decades. And he's still preaching the exact same message. There are some things that you can take from the 2019 interview with the Breakfast Club and verbatim, He said the exact same thing in the 1995 interview with Detroit Black Journal. Verbatim. Tone and Yvette, especially in this little video that Tone just put up the other day on his Twitter, again says that black businesses, black entrepreneurship, keeping the black dollar in the black community and all of that is not going to help bridge this wealth gap between black Americans and white Americans. But yet he wanted everybody to stop everything and support Byron Allen, who is a businessman, in his case against Comcast, which was a business deal. It was all about business. All about business. That's what the whole Byron Allen versus Comcast case was about. Business. Because Comcast wouldn't do business with Byron Allen. The 1866 Civil Rights Act specifically talks about black folk doing business and being able to contract to do business. So if businesses are not the answer for black folks, if business is not the answer to help us economically, then why were Tone and Yvette pushing us to support Byron Allen in this case with Comcast and to support the 1866 Civil Rights Act? But Dr. Anderson, on the other hand, has for decades talked about until we build our own economics, until we build our own economic base, until we get into practicing group economics and group politics, we don't stand a chance. Business. And in 2019, at the ripe old age of 85, he hasn't changed that. It's about consistency, people. It's about folks being consistent in what they believe. It's about folks being consistent in what they promote. It's about folks being consistent in what they put out to the masses and what they bring to the black community. It's about consistency. So how can two people who have not been consistent, and I will put up the link to the report that went along with the video. I'll put up the link to the video and I'll put up the link to the report that went along with the video, and you can see for yourself. Jason Black broke it down perfectly. I'll also put up his video. He broke it down perfectly, read from several pages of the report. But how can two people who have been so totally inconsistent possibly try to discredit a man who has been consistent, on point for decades, whose message has not changed for decades, whose ideology has not changed for decades, whose plan for Black America has not changed for decades? So for those of you who don't want to hold to this whole argument that we should respect our elders, you understand what I'm saying? All you that want to talk about what has Dr. Claud Anderson done for the black community, put it out there for you to know how to fix it. And because the black community wouldn't listen, and because the black community wanted acceptance and wanted to be a part of and wanted to integrate with the dominant society, you pushed aside this man's genius and what he was trying to tell you, what he was making available to you. But for all of you that don't want to hold to that argument that elders who have done the work, who have put in the years, put in the work, should be respected, then look at it from another point of view. Consistency. Who is being consistent? Just like when it comes to the voices of the new black media, who is being consistent? Jason Black, the Black Authority, Professor Black Truth, Tariq Nasheed, and others, Phil Scott, and others. These folks are consistent. They say the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. If you listen to their videos now and then go back and listen to a video that they did 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, they're saying the exact same things over and over and over again. Consistency. Their opinions, their ideology, their plans don't change just because moods change or just because the political climate changes, or just because the present president changes, or just because social beliefs and trends or whatever change. Their ideology, their talking points have remained the same for years. That's consistency. But with Yvette and Tone, you don't know what you're going to get from one day to the next. Honey. You don't know what you're going to get from one day to the next. And all of this coming out just attacking people. Just attacking people. Now, you got to remember what Tone had to say about T.I. and Jay Morrison doing that first Revolt TV summit. You know, he talked about how these people didn't have degrees and how these people, didn't have college educations and all of that. And because they didn't have certain degrees and because they didn't have certain education or whatever, they didn't have a right or they didn't have a place to speak as far as reparations or any of this was concerned. Okay, but now you're attacking somebody who has degrees. Somebody who has a PhD. And you're saying that even he isn't qualified to speak on economics and to speak on the wealth gap and all of that. Now, you got to make up your mind. Either you got to have a degree, a college education to speak, or you don't. Another place of inconsistency. Another place of inconsistency. You say, Tone and Yvette, you say that you're not happy with the Democratic Party. You're not happy with the way that the Democratic Party has treated black folk up until this point. Foundational black Americans, with their policies and the fact that we have been loyal voters to them for 5, 6 decades and have nothing to show for it. So you say that you want to get their attention and let them know, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to vote for you. We're going to do this vote down ballot mess or whatever. But yet in this report that you specifically tell us to go read in this video, in this report, all of them are Democratic talking points. All of them are different. Baby bonds. That's what Cory Booker is pushing. On page 4, when you talk about what you do for all Americans will disproportionately affect Black Americans. Sounds like Kamala Harris when she said that she wasn't going to specifically do anything for Black people. No. So as upset as you act like you are with the Democratic Party, you're still trying to push their agenda. Inconsistency, people. It's not about who you like or who you don't like. It's not about whether or not you like Jason Black, the Black Authority. It's not about whether or not you like Tariq Nasheed. It's not about whether or not you like Professor Black Truth. It's not about whether or not you like me. It's not about whether or not you like Terrain Rain Reloaded or Black India. Black India. He calls that's the name of his channel, Black India. And some of the other voices of New Black Need. It's not about whether or not you like people. It's about the truth. And it's about people being consistent in the information that they bring you. It's about people being consistent in the messages that they bring you. It's about people being consistent in the plan for Black empowerment that they present to you. Who is consistent? Who can you count on to be consistent? Who can you count on to deliver the same message to you over and over and over and over and over again? And you don't have to worry about them changing just because they get a certain amount of dislikes on a video. Or just because, they get a certain number of followers, or just because a certain number of people unsubscribe to their channel because they put out something that they didn't particularly like. Despite what may be going on, they are consistent. And you can count on them to be consistent. Consistency goes hand in hand with trustworthiness. If you are consistent in your behavior, then that speaks to whether or not I can trust you. If you are a consistent liar and you consistently lie to me, then I know I can't trust you. Why? Because of your consistency. But if you are consistently providing me with accurate information, if you are consistently coming to me with receipts that prove what you're saying, if you consistently tell me the truth, if you consistently come to me with historical facts that I can go back and research and look up for myself and find, yeah, you're on point, then because I can consistently trust you to provide me with accurate information, then I can trust you. These folks running around talking about Tariq is a scammer and Boyce Watkins is a scammer or whatever. How are these people? See, the reason why they continue to get that support, that level of support, where people are willing to consistently support them, consistently donate to whatever project or whatever crowdfunding they got going on, or whatever the case may be, is because those people have consistently produced. They have consistently done exactly what they said they would do. That's the reason why other folk consistently support them. So like I said, even if you don't want to subscribe to this whole thing about your elders and you need to show respect for the elders or whatever the case may be, okay, then look at it from a point of consistency. Who has been consistent? Who is being consistent? Because Yvette and Tone are not consistent. They're not, I mean, in this little bit of time that they've been in this space, look how many times they've switched up. But I can say this for them. The one thing that they have been consistent about, and I'm talking about Tone and Yvette, the one thing that they have been consistent about is attacking other people. They have been consistent with attacking anybody who comes with anything that is remotely different or anything that they perceive as being remotely in opposition to what they got going on. They have been consistent in that respect. They have been consistent in their attacks. They have been consistent in coming after folk who wasn't bothering them. They came after Tariq simply because this man said that he was going to do a Foundation of Black American Conference. And I don't know at what point, when we got to the point where you have the right to tell somebody that they can't do a conference. They have been consistent as far as showing their jealousy. Well, it's not jealousy. Jealousy is when you are afraid that somebody's going to take something that belongs to you. Envy is when you are upset about something or you want something that somebody else has. So they have consistently shown their envy. They got upset because Tariq was mentioned in the in the New York Times article that Farrah Stockman did on ADOS. They got upset because Tariq was mentioned before they were mentioned. Because remember, Tone praised the article. Tone thanked Farrah Stockman. Tone put it out there that because they ADOS had been talked about in this article, we have arrived and all of this. And that whole article was doing nothing but tearing ADOS down. In the article, she talked about ADOS being Trump supporters. She called Tone and Yvette insurgents. She almost equated ADOS to a terrorist organization, basically. But he praised that article and thanked her for it. And then turned around and attacked Tariq on Twitter for a tweet that he had done about Donald Trump where he was bashing the Democratic Party. But he didn't find any fault in Farrah Stockman basically saying that ADOS was a bunch of Trump supporters. So if it's one thing they've been consistent with, they've been consistent in their attacks of people, to people that weren't bothering them. I mean, and to attack Tariq was stupid. Let's be real. To attack, I don't care whether you like Tariq or not. I don't care whether you like what Nasheed says or whatever. The bottom line is to attack somebody who has a much larger platform. And this person has been promoting what you got going on. This person has been promoting it, and because this person has been promoting it, it's getting all kind of exposure. It's blowing up because this particular person is promoting and causing what you got going on to be exposed to the public. And then you gonna turn around and attack that person. And if it wasn't enough to attack him on Twitter, then Tone does a whole video where he accuses Tariq of doing a competing conference and accuses the man of splintering the group. When Tariq had already made it clear that he wanted Tone and Yvette to be a part of his foundational Black American Conference. So if it's one thing that they have been, this is the only thing that they have been consistent on. And it is attacking folk and blocking anybody who doesn't agree with them. Attacks and blocking. That's what they have been consistent on. They haven't been consistent with anything else. They haven't been consistent with their ideology. They haven't been consistent with their talking points. They haven't been consistent with their plans. They haven't been consistent about how they feel about the Democratic Party. They haven't been consistent with any of that. They haven't even been consistent as far as the whole ADOS is concerned. Because remember, the first and the original inconsistency was making all of us believe that it was simply a lineage. It was simply a designation to designate foundational Black Americans. And it wasn't until a year plus later that we find out that that wasn't the case. That ADOS actually was an organization, a political organization, and they called themselves the leaders of it. That was the first and original inconsistency. Right there, everybody should have stopped and said, wait a minute, hold up, wait a minute. That should have been enough right there to make you start paying attention. And the consistencies continued from there. I mean, even within the organization, there is inconsistency. Even within the organization, you have some ADOS that say don't vote at all unless you're being offered tangibles, reparations, something specific, a Black agenda that's specifically for Black folk. Then you have other ADOS that are promoting this down ballot, this vote down ballot bullshit. So even within that, even within the organization, you have inconsistency. But again, it goes back to what I've said in other videos. We as Black people are so big on idol worship. We are so big on, we stop looking at the message and we start getting all wrapped up and entangled and caught up with the messenger. And once we do that, we can no longer see the message. Folks are so caught up with Tone and Yvette as individual people that they haven't realized that the message has changed. It's not the same message as it was when they first came out. I've listened to people and I've seen comments where people talk about, Jason Black, the Black Authority, talks about, single mothers and ADHD kids and all of this kind of stuff. And folks are against it because he says what he says about single mothers and thoughts and whores and all of this kind of stuff and all that. But the bottom line is the man is consistent. If you go back 8 years and listen to his video, he was saying the same thing about single mothers and thoughts and these deadbeat dads and all of this kind of stuff. And because you was raised in, in a single mother home, you don't know how to really be a man and all. Consistency, people. Consistency. And just because you didn't like it, just because you may have unsubscribed, just because you may have stopped listening or stopped following, it didn't change his message. That's consistency. And it's that kind of consistency that cannot be co-opted. It's that kind of consistency that cannot be bought out. It's that kind of consistency that scares white supremacy. When no matter what you try to do, no matter what you say, whether you unfollow me, whether you talk about me, you understand what I'm saying? Whether you shut down my channel a couple of times, whether I get strike after strike after strike, no matter what you do, I'm going to keep on preaching the exact same message. That's the kind of consistency that you can trust. So it's all about consistency, folks. It's all about people being consistent in their ideology. It's all about people being consistent in their message. It's all about people saying, I mean, because I've done it. See, I can't talk what I don't know, but I can talk this because I've done it. I have gone back and I have listened to videos that TBA did 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. I have listened to videos that Professor Black Truth did 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. I have listened to what Tariq Nasheed was saying 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. Consistent. Yes, we grow. Yes, we evolve. And because we grow and because we evolve, some things change. But there are some fundamental things that just are never going to change. And I have done the research on Dr. Claud Anderson. And here is the video saying in 1995 the exact same thing that he's saying in 2019. Consistency, people. Who do you want to follow? Who do you want to listen to? Somebody that's going to change everything as soon as the wind blows in another direction. Somebody that's going to change up everything that they told you, everything that they promised you, everything that they were supposed to be standing on, everything that they were supposed to be about, everything that they're supposed to believe in. They're going to change it up as soon as the wind blows or as soon as somebody comes offering them, you know, a little bit of recognition or offering them a little bit of money or whatever the case may be. Who are you going to depend on? Somebody like that or somebody that no matter what happens, no matter what goes on, their message to you does not change. That's the question. Now, just to prove to you what I'm saying, because like I said, the video will be linked, several videos will be linked in the description box, as well as this particular video that you're about to hear a clip from is already on my channel. You know, the video that Tone did, you know, as far as talking about all these myths and baby bonds and government jobs and all of that kind of stuff, you know, come on, I'm sorry. But the government, so now we're supposed to depend on the same government that enslaved us, the same government that came up with Jim Crow, the Black Codes, redlining, all of the same government that got us in this predicament. We're now supposed to depend on that government to get us out. When nothing in that government has changed. Joe Biden, the author of the 1994 crime bill, who kickstarted mass incarceration, is a part of the government that we're supposed to be dependent on. Hillary Clinton is a part of the government that we're supposed to be dependent on. Barack Obama was a part of the government that we're supposed to be dependent on. Mitch McConnell is a part of the government that we're supposed to be dependent on. All of these folks are the part of the government that we're supposed to be now depending on to get us out of the shit that they put us in with government jobs and baby bonds. Or reparations. When Tone and Yvette promised you that this was all about nothing but reparations for American descendants of slaves. Now, it's either or it's or. Now, either it's going to be reparations or it's going to be all of this other shit that will take place of reparations. Well, I'm sorry. Baby bonds and government job guarantees are not going to take the place of my reparations. You owe me my reparations. I want my reparations. I don't want no baby bonds. I don't want no government job guarantee. I want my reparations. I want what you owe me. But that is not what Tone and Yvette are telling you in that report. And oh yes, the report will be linked. Now, if they have taken it down, I downloaded it. So if you want me to send you a copy of it, if they have taken it down, then, you know, I got the email. I'll have the email address to Undiluted TV, and you can hit me up in the email and you can tell me, okay, please send me, you know, a copy of this report. Just in case the report has been taken down. But to put an end to this video, because it's mighty long, to put an end to this video, I'm going to just let you listen to just a clip of what Dr. Claud Anderson was saying back in 1995. And I want you to compare that to what he just said on The Breakfast Club in 2019.
Black labor, white wealth has taken Black America by storm. Tonight, Dr. Claud Anderson revisits the issues surrounding the controversial book. Welcome to Detroit Black Journal. I'm Darrell Wood. On this edition of the Journal, Dr. Claud Anderson provides solutions to make Black America economically competitive as a group. That's straight ahead on Detroit Black Journal. Think of. The book is being bought by the dozens, literally, because people are starting to, I guess, identify with some of the concepts you're bringing up in the book. What we get in this book is a historic context for the situation African Americans or blacks, whichever term is politically correct this week, find themselves in this country, whether it be economic, political, whether it's the social path up. Folk, that contract is not new. It was first issued in 1638 by the Maryland colony. What was happening politically in this country as it was affecting black folk, I could say it was a response to the book The Bell Curve, which proclaimed that black folk were genetically inferior. And what I want to do is tell Black America that you're not genetically inferior, that you've been socially engineered into your present predicament around this world. And I also could say that it was a response to the contract with white America. And to tell black folk that contract is not new, that it was first issued in 1638 by the Maryland colony. And nothing has changed. And that black folk are still fighting for self-sufficiency and competitiveness in this country, and that we must come together quickly or what risk being a permanent underclass in the society.
One of the alarming predictions you make in the book is along those lines. You mentioned that blacks will be pretty much a permanent underclass in America by the year 2015. Why the year 2015?
2015 because what I've concluded from analysis is that there's going to be a converging of social factors nationally and internationally that's going to place blacks in a permanent status of underclassship. And we anticipate by that point in time, based on all the research that's coming to us, that the next generation of whites is going to be more anti-black than they've been since the Civil Rights Movement. 2, we anticipate by the same token about 86 million Hispanics coming into the United States and about 41 million Asians by that point in time, which is going to kick black folk out of being the minority in the society down to a minority. We've been number 2 in the society for 400 years as a group. We're going to become number 4. And if we have not gotten anything after being number 2 for 400 years, you guess what's going to happen when we become number 4. Because at that point in time, all the new groups coming into America, they're coming in higher than we are, because this country operates off of a preferential acceptance program, which means that groups are coming in based on skin color. They're going from the lightest down to the darkest. Light, yellow, brown, black. And that's what our immigration laws are based on. And black folk would not be able to penetrate through those groups to get to the white society when that happens, because those groups owe us nothing. They don't understand our problems, and they are competitive with us, and we don't begin to be a little more aggressive about being in a competitive posture, they're going to eat our lunches. If it had been a race issue instead of a class issue, then why didn't you have poor whites who were the working class? Now, after the civil rights movement and blacks became obsolete, now poor whites and some of the other whites are claiming that they are the working class in this country. But they were not. They were supposed to be the management class up until that point in time. Blacks were the labor class in the society.
It's interesting that you bring that up, but wouldn't it be fair to look through that tunnel of history and see that certainly poor whites have worked hard in this country and have had to come up through some of the same kinds of tyranny that blacks have experienced in America?
Oh yes, they have. You will always have some poor whites, because that's a class issue. That's not a race issue. See, if it had been a race issue instead of a class issue, then why didn't you have poor whites out there picking cotton along with blacks? Why weren't they enslaved? Why didn't you have poor Indians? Why didn't you have poor Asians? Why didn't you have poor Hispanics out there in the field with black folk? It was a racial issue, not a class issue.
When you take a look at what's wrong, and certainly the book does cover a lot of what's wrong with Black America, is it fair to say that at this time in our history, economically speaking, that blacks can, as we have been told to, pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps?
Yes, you can. With what you do have, you don't have very much of anything. The wealth and power and resources in this society have been frozen since 1790. It has not changed barely one iota. Okay, that's for instance. Let's go back to 1860. On the eve of the Civil War. 5% of the American population, the white population, controlled 24.6% of the wealth in the country. Now, after a Civil War, World War I, World War II, a Depression, Korean War, Vietnam War, and the Civil Rights Movement, it went up 1 point. Okay, so then it's 24 point something like 6. Okay, now at the same time, on the eve of the Civil War, black folk at that time had 1% of the wealth. Black folk now, after that same point in time, all those social turmoils and international upheavals, black folk now up to a little less than 1% still. That means we moved up less than 1/2 of 1% after all that turmoil in the world. So obviously the wealth is frozen in this society. Whites now control almost 100%, Daryl, of all the wealth, the income, the power, the resources, the privileges, the businesses, and all levels of government. Black folk do not have the sufficient wherewithal to be able to manage their lives and compete. Now, contrary to what anybody tells you, we cannot compete because we don't have it. It's not a question of that we are genetically inferior or inferior as human beings. It's that you do not have the appropriate tools and devices and controls and mechanisms to be able to compete with other groups.
But certainly we can look and see in this society where blacks have matriculated economically, educationally, politically, there's some advancement.
Oh, yes, most definitely there's some, because there's always going to be an exception to the rule. I mean, I've heard people ask me on different shows, Dr. Anderson, things are that bad for black folk. Well, how do you explain Bill Cosby and Oprah and Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan? What does that mean? What it means is white racism is not perfect. That's what it means. You'll always have exceptional blacks for a number of reasons. First of all, you'll have some exceptional blacks simply because they defy and beat mathematical probabilities, point one. Point two, you will have some blacks who will survive and do extremely well simply because whites want to be able to demonstrate that the society is not totally shut out, against black folk, locked up against black folk. And thirdly, you will find there'll be some exceptional blacks who have been picked or chosen by some of the white power structures that this is my black, this is a special black. Now, in history, we had a special name for those individuals that I talked about in the book. Those what we call some ultra conservative.
And as
but see, racism means race. It comes from the word group, and blacks are still perceived as a group in this country. We went into racism, we went into slavery as a group, we went into Jim Crowism as a group. We can only come out as a group, and individualism has no significance unless it's not tied back into trying to help that group come out of that deplorable condition.
Then because we just don't have enough time to address everything that I would like you to address, if we take a look at a few points and just summarily talk about them. For instance, what's wrong with blacks politically in America, and why haven't we made more strides?
Because for a number of reasons. First of all, because we still tend to think that partisanship is important to black folk, and but whites do not place as much importance on partisanship, political partisanship, as we do. See, when black folk did not belong to any party, they were independent. They were enslaved. From 1618 up until 1866, blacks were slaves. They didn't belong to any party, and they got slavery out of it. From 1866 to 1936, about 96% of all the blacks in the United States belonged to the Republican Party. What they got was Jim Crowism out of it. From 1936 up to 1996, almost 97% of all the blacks in the United States belonged to the Democratic Party. What they've gotten is benign neglect. So partisanship is not the issue. The issue is that black folk have never had an effective strategy for dealing with white racism in this country. That's the issue. And we have never sat down and say, how do we go about dealing with structural racism? If we are the only planned minority in the country, as I just indicated to you a few minutes ago that we were planned into it by a public policy which says that the quote on black folk is zero. You're not going to have anybody going abroad bringing black folk through refugee programs into the United States from Somalia or Ethiopia or from Haiti. You're not going to do it because they're fearful of blacks. There's a quote on blacks in this country. So we have never sat down and said, how do we win as a minority? You can win as a minority population if you learn and find out how it's been done in the past. Jews are a minority religious group, but they do win. The National Rifle Association is a minority social civic group, but they do win. The wealthy elite in this country is a minority group, but they do win. When will we sit down and strategize how do we win as a minority?
And I guess perhaps the more operative word in that sentence might be, how do we win as a group?
That's right, as a minority group.
Now, do blacks have to act in concert? Then is what you're saying. Blacks have to act in concert if they are going to stave off becoming a permanent underclass.
That's right, because that's how you perceive. You must deal with the realities of life. You are perceived as a group, and you must act like a group. You must do everything in block. You must practice group economics. You must practice group politics. For instance, in politics, what I would tell blacks to do is just the opposite of what everyone else is telling them. Never divide yourself. Anything that divides you weakens you. You live in a society where the social premise is that the majority wins and the minority loses. Okay? Now, never divide yourself along political lines. Stay as a block. If necessary, go independent. Do not split yourself up among the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and Independent Party. You're weaker now than you ever were. Vote as a block. Go out right now and register any and every black that can vote. Then pull yourself out of every party and hold yourself above both of the national parties and say, I don't care who runs for an office. We will deliver our vote as a block to whoever makes the greatest promise to black folk and deliver for us. That's who we'll vote for. And we will not tell you who we're going to vote for until the day of the election.
So you actually exercise some leverage.
That's right, and you demand respect, and that's the point in time they watch you and they give some credence to the effects of your vote. And more importantly, you should also create an independent party in this country for black folk, so that whenever if
like Ross Perot,
if he runs,
Ross Perot, he's trying to do that.
Well, if Ross Perot runs, you're going to find a greater move in this country to the independent parties. If a person runs for the Democratic Party, Republican Party, and Ross Perot runs, you got a three-way split. Run a black candidate in an independent party, and that way try to take the election with 26% of the vote. Demand respect from people. Whether or not you win or lose is not the point. Get your issues out there, support your own issues, and support your people as a group.
Now you heard it for yourself. This was 1995 when he talked to Darrell Woods at Detroit Black Journal. Consistency. He's consistently saying the same thing here in 1995 that he's telling us today in 2019 and has been telling us throughout that whole period of time. Consistency. Now, of course, if you want to hear this whole, if you want to hear the whole thing, like I said, the video will be linked in the description box as well as is already on my channel. But it's about consistency, folks. Who is being consistent? Who can we as foundational black Americans, who can we depend on to be consistent with us? Who can we depend on to consistently deliver to us the same message over and over and over and over and over again, despite what's going on in the social climate, despite what's going on in the political climate, despite what's going on in the economic climate, despite what's going on, they will continue to tell us the same things over and over and over again. That's what this is about. Folks being consistent. Can I trust you to be consistent? Can I trust you to tell me the same thing today that you told me yesterday, and day before yesterday, and the day before that, and the month before that, and the year before that? Can I trust you to be consistent in your message? Let's get on code, folks. Let's stay on code.